I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling, but out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi everyone, welcome back to Outside the Therapy Room. Today I am joined by Lisette Weber. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. So my name is Lisette Weber. I'm a local postpartum doula, a perinatal mental health advocate. I'm a mom of two, and I really came to this work through my own experience of having postpartum depression, anxiety, really probably pregnancy also. I really hated being pregnant, and I think that was like my early indication that like I wasn't 100% mentally there the whole time. And so just realizing how much community and having people to support you just was so important, and it's sort of just wanting to do that for other people, especially since my second was born 3 months before the pandemic. So I had like the first experience of a baby where, you know, things were just dark and depressed and just not really feeling like I was doing a great job, what I should and shouldn't do as a parent. And yeah, just sort of planning better for the second time, knowing that I would need support and knowing better what support I needed. We brought in a doula to the support system, and it was great. But then at 3 months, pandemic started. The world shut down. Suddenly I had no support system. It literally felt illegal to have a support system with like a 3-month-old baby. And it kind of just made me realize that like people need support. And that was something I was becoming passionate about. It was about supporting people virtually. I had friends who were pregnant before the pandemic started and then were having their babies through the pandemic, and just I became like the person who would just drop off candy at your house.
I love that.
In the pandemic.
Sometimes we need that.
It's just like, oh, you have a newborn. Well, here's like a meal, but also like some chocolate and things to get you through the rough times. Because what else can you do? You couldn't go in and hold their babies, or let alone see their babies. So it's just all these little ways, and I started my doula training and then just went from there supporting families.
The pandemic and pregnancy and having young kids, I think for everybody, we lost that sense of connection. But in the beginning of motherhood, or even through pregnancy or the few weeks after delivering a child, it's like you're already so isolated in so many ways. Even though people are there, a lot of the times people are there for the baby, and the moms sometimes get forgotten. And so it is such a difficult moment. And so during the pandemic, I can't imagine how difficult that was for all of those new moms that became new moms at the very early stages of the pandemic. But what is a doula? Because I think before we started recording, I had mentioned how doula, when I was pregnant, it felt like there was kind of 3 options: doula, midwife, and doctors. But you corrected me that that's not actually how I should look at things.
Yeah. So first and foremost, doulas are not medical professionals. There's no medical training. We don't have like years of, you know, becoming a doctor. We're simply like a really good friend who just has a lot of knowledge and are nerdy about pregnancy, labor and delivery, postpartum. Really, like there's a whole full spectrum of doulas. You can have like a fertility doula who can support you through that. Like it's just
I heard of death doulas.
Yeah.
Too.
So yeah, it's really full spectrum. Like from birth to bones, you can have that kind of support, and just it's really people just to walk alongside you, who have conversations with you to find out what your ideal outcome is. Whether I'm getting a birth doula what kind of a birth are you looking for? What are your goals for your birth? And just all that like childbirth educational type stuff, and helping you set realistic expectations, but also to be there for hands-on support through your labor. I'm a postpartum doula, so I kind of come in after you've had baby. So I have the wonderful opportunity to hold like fresh babies, which is just so good. And just help people to get into a routine. And often working prenatally with creating a postpartum plan and to kind of help you build your village, build your community, build a support system that feels right for you. And also just like that practical hands-on support to have somebody who's not a family member there, who will be non-judgmental. I don't care if you're in your sweats and your house is a mess and like show up and everybody, including the dog, is crying. Like, you kind of come in there to be that calming presence of like, I'll hold your screaming baby, give you some space to go have a shower, have a nap. I'll calm your baby down if I can. And often they just need somebody to hold them through it. And just helping to recenter the family and finding some peace in that, which is totally different from like a midwife or an OB. They're more medically trained. They can handle the traumas that can come with childbirth. They know when things go wrong, what to do. Doulas are more just the hands-on, helping you through that. And then often like helping you to process the things that went on as well.
Yeah, like the mental health support of it. It sounds like, I mean, from what I'm hearing, you are this like postpartum best friend to the new mom and just being able to be there for support. But it sounds like you're also supporting in those basic needs with like showering, sleeping, eating, all of those things that sometimes can go forgotten when we're trying to keep a little human alive. That's literally just been given to us from the hospital and then they send us home. Like, why? Who let me go home with this baby?
And there's often not a lot of conversation about like, what does postpartum actually look like? Like, do they talk to you about potentially having a tear that's going to make sitting really complicated? Or what does life after a cesarean birth look like? Are you going to be up and running around and doing all the things? No, like really, you just need to rest. And like, how do you facilitate that happening? People don't talk about that. They don't talk about setting realistic postpartum expectations. We all sort of, I know I'm guilty of it. You plan like, this is like what I want for my birth, and I want it to be natural, and I want it to like feel beautiful. And my first birth, I went into it so naive with my first, of just like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be great. And then like, it just, my first was just a cascade of interventions. My second one, I just was like, I just want to have fun. That was my only expectation, which it really seems like a weird thing to say about, I'm going to have a birth and it's going to be fun. And literally with our doula, we played a board game for most of my labor. And we were finishing up the game and my water broke. And then like, things just went crazy from there. Like, it was like, okay, the midwives called the midwives. I had a home birth. Like, everything went quickly, but it felt really relaxed at the same time. And like, I was laughing. I was going through like transition where like, it's that stereotypical, like, you suddenly feel like the world is ending and you don't think you can do it anymore. But I'm also like laughing because I'm just like, this is ridiculous. There's like this feel like I'm going to poop everywhere and what is happening, and just giggling about it. And it was just such a completely different experience, especially the difference between one being so supported and one where I wasn't, and I hadn't really planned, and I had set really unrealistic expectations.
I think the difference between the first and second, like I had a C-section with my first. It had to be an emergency C-section because I was 2 weeks late. It was so hard, but there was so much leading up to the planning of the labor piece and not so much about what kind of happens after. Obviously, you're like, oh, I'm going to have a baby. I have to feed it. I have to buy these things. We plan for all of these things after the birth. But I think we don't always look at how it's going to impact our mental health, what kind of boundaries we want to have in place, because we're so excited most of the time. We're so excited about this new baby coming and we can't wait for other people to see. But we're at such a different mental state afterwards. I was exhausted. I had been laboring for, I think it was 16 hours until they decided to do the C-section. Then I did, I had a C-section at 4 a.m. when I went into the hospital at 7 a.m. the day before.
Oh gosh.
And so I was exhausted. Then the surgery happened. My legs were numb because I had an epidural, and then they gave me a spinal afterwards, before I got the C-section. So I couldn't stand up for so long afterwards. And I was exhausted. I remember coming home from the hospital after a few days, and my mom had left us food right outside the door, and she made me a mango smoothie because throughout my whole pregnancy I was craving mangoes. She made me a mango smoothie. We walk in, my husband's holding the baby in the car seat, and I don't know what happened, but I dropped the mango smoothie and it broke and it splattered everywhere. But I just started bawling my eyes out. And my poor husband's like, oh my God, the baby.
What is happening?
Yvonne, what's happening? And it's just, there's so many emotions that are happening. There's so much happening in our body with our hormones changing, and it really is a big impact on our mental health. So being a postpartum doula, what are some things that you see with the women that you support after labor when it comes to their mental health?
I think the biggest thing that comes up is people realizing that their expectations of postpartum, that what society has told them, what maybe their mom or mother-in-law have told them, are so different from reality. And I think when all that sets in, that's when you start seeing the struggle of, I'm not good at this. I'm just so tired all the time. I don't know if I can handle this. I'm not the parent for this baby.
Or not connecting with your child. Like everyone's like, when you see your child, you're gonna,
it's gonna be love at first sight. And I'm gonna say that, like, my daughter, it was probably 6 months before I truly felt the love. Mostly because I spent the first 4 months in a veil of darkness. Like, I had so much, in depression and anxiety, that it took over all the happiness that I should have had. Anything.
I like the quote unquote should have had.
What we like to say in a support group I facilitate is don't should all over yourself.
That's what we say in therapy.
Yeah. So don't, you shouldn't do anything. You should just figure out who you want to be as a parent and how are you going to make that happen. What are your actual values in terms of becoming a parent?
And the should sometimes are those expectations that are externally, right? Like, I should be, all done up when people come to visit me. Like, where does that should come from?
Right.
If you want to, because it's going to make you feel better or whatever, then sure. But the should oftentimes is a sense of obligation to have to do something. And so I love the stop shoulding all over yourself, because it's really important to kind of recognize that small word should can have a huge weight with it.
It's like you could get all showered and ready for people to come over with a hot pot of coffee on, or you can just be in your PJs slumming it with nursing, and they can get their own damn coffee.
Yeah.
Right? They should be bringing you a coffee.
Yeah. But that's where the difficulty and the pressure and the anxiety and all of that can come in, is when we put this pressure on ourselves to meet the expectations of other people. Then we can become anxious of, oh my gosh, my house is a mess. People are going to judge me for that. Or I don't have coffee on when guests come over. They're going to think that I'm a rude host or that I'm this. Like, a lot of those anxieties can come up because of these expectations. And where do these expectations even come from?
Like, does your best friend expect you to have coffee on when they come over?
Yeah.
Like, really, do people actually have those expectations, or is that like something that you've internalized? It's really hard to know where those all come from. Like, we come, like, there's this whole culture of impossible parenting that Olivia Scobie talks about, of like how, you know, you have to make every moment magical, and you have to, you know, there's just all these set expectations that like society is pressing on us. And it's like, where did these actually come from? What are these values actually? Are they meaningful to me? If not, then like make your own values. That being said, like the baby blues is just something that I think it's like 80% of new parents will experience some form of, you know, weepiness, not really feeling like you have it all together in those first 2 weeks. But I think that shift into like perinatal mental health struggles is when it doesn't go away, when it like lasts beyond that like 2 week mark, where it starts affecting your way of living, when it starts actually becoming a problem. There's also just like a whole spectrum with under perinatal mental health. Like I know I've mentioned, like I struggled with depression and anxiety, and depression just was really everything just felt hard and slow, and it was just really difficult to do anything. Which just makes it really hard to be a parent to a new baby. It makes the like whole I want to sleep all the time hard when your baby doesn't have a schedule. They're up whenever they want to be, and you also have to be awake for that. And like the struggle of not being able to sleep was just so hard. Whereas anxiety just felt like really fast, where it just felt like all of a sudden I would go from like 0 to 100 with a panic attack. I felt like I should be able to manage my daughter having like a crying moment where like nothing I did helped. But I felt like I should be able to manage that. And then, I mean, I don't think we talk about with anxiety is also this postpartum rage. Like I felt so unbelievably angry at this little like 5-week-old baby, because why wouldn't you just be quiet? I'm doing all these things, and like you're 5 weeks old, but like how dare you not like take my love and affection and my support and my trying to help you through this moment right now. Like the rage, like nobody talks to you about like how hard it can be and how guilty you can feel, because you're just like, oh my gosh, where did that come from?
And it doesn't take away from you being a good parent.
No.
And I think that's where a lot of that guilt comes. That rage is completely normal. Again, like obviously normal. And then there's harming your child, right? Those are two different things. And I think it's important for us to, you know, separate them right now. But I think with the rage too, there's so much overstimulation that's happening. There's so much, like you're sleep deprived, you maybe haven't eaten, you haven't showered. A lot of our basic needs are not fully being met because our focus is on this child. And then add on top of that the lack of appreciation that comes with motherhood. Like your child isn't going to be like, thanks, mommy, for taking such good care of me. Like it's all consuming in that moment. And when we feel like we're having to do that alone and feeling those pressures of this expectation that we have to always be, you know, on top of things with our kid, it just overflows. And that's where the rage comes in. You mentioned baby blues. And so baby blues usually, like you already pointed out, last a few days up to a couple of weeks after your baby's born. And it is kind of like those hormonal changes, the adjustment of now we have to keep this thing alive. And so there's like feelings of anxiety, sadness, irritability. We're more overwhelmed. Like now we are literally having to keep this child alive. It's dependent on us. So there's overwhelming feelings that come with that. There's crying, like me crying over my mango. Really wanted my mango drink. I was crying. Reduced concentration, challenges with appetite. Again, that can be both hormonal and attention. Like if your attention somewhere else, we might not be able to pay attention to our hunger cues. And then trouble sleeping. Well, we're going through changes also as our babies are trying to get to some form of routine, which they don't have right away. They don't come out with a routine in check. A lot of babies are confused or don't know what's day and what's night.
Well, they still think they're part of you.
Exactly.
They're like, we aren't two people. We're one person. You need to hold me and love me and feed me, and I want to sleep on you. And that's just how life is, because I used to just be literally in you.
Yeah.
And now I'm out in the world, and you're expecting me to be a little bit more independent, and I'm not ready for that. So I'm just going to like continue to believe we are one person.
Yes. Yeah. But it is going to then impact your sleep as well. And so those baby blues last up to a couple of weeks. And postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety can sometimes be seen as baby blues first, but the symptoms are more intense and they last a lot longer, like you've already mentioned. It can be months after giving birth. And a lot of those, like you've already mentioned, for depression, there can be mood swings. That's where the rage and the anger can come in. Crying, difficulty bonding with your baby, withdrawing from family and friends. Maybe part of that is also the expectation of not having the capacity to mask or to put on a face in front of your family so that there isn't any worry for them. Or
because you should have it all together, right?
Right. Or the guilt of, I'm not bonding with my baby, but I'm going to fake it till I make it and show these people that I'm okay. And so sometimes instead of having to mask, we just withdraw and we just don't want to see those people anymore. There's also like an inability of being able to sleep. We're overwhelmed with tiredness and loss of energy, which is completely normal in those beginning moments. But this strong feeling of hopelessness that can come in, again, like those few beginning months up to a year of postpartum depression. And when it goes undiagnosed, it can lead to postpartum psychosis, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, like, thank you for sharing what anxiety and depression felt like for you postpartum. It's hard, and I don't think it's talked about too much. I would say maybe more recently it's starting to be talked about.
There was a shift in the pandemic because it became so obvious that people weren't doing well. People were realizing, oh, parents aren't okay.
Yeah.
They're stuck at home. I mean, people were giving birth with masks on.
Yeah.
People were giving birth without their support system at all.
Having to be alone.
Alone, not knowing, like there was just so much unknown going into the pandemic that I think it just really shifted the ideas of community.
Yeah.
And like once bubbling, became a thing, you could have like your bubble of support, which was like such a godsend.
It was.
Because we just my parents are local, so we just bubbled with them, and they started taking my oldest for 1 day a week just to like give us a break and help break up the monotony of the weeks, because we literally were doing nothing. And I'm so, as much as I hated the fact that, the pandemic happened, I don't think anybody's like, yay, pandemic. I'm so grateful that, my daughter has all of these years now, even, of just every Monday, my parents take her for some one-on-one. Now it's my two kiddos go have some grandparent time, but, I didn't have that.
And you get a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really important. And I think with the pandemic, you're right. Nobody's yaying that this happened, but it's also helpful to you can feel more than one way about a situation. It was a really hard time, and we can be grateful for those routines and traditions that ended up happening. Like it sounds like it carried on to be a tradition after the lockdown and everything. So that's really nice.
Yeah. And I think it became really obvious that there's a lot of loneliness around becoming a new parent.
Yeah.
And so people were seeking villages, seeking communities, trying to find support. I mean, support groups went virtual. So when I had my first, locally here, there was like one therapist and one support group. My anxiety would not let me leave my house with my daughter because she would cry and somebody would see me as incompetent and somebody would take my baby. Like, this is literally the narrative that my anxiety told me. So like there was no way I was going to commit to a 6-week, have to leave my house one day a week for like, you know, those 6 weeks. I'm like, I couldn't do that. And so seeing all of these virtual support groups popping up throughout the pandemic, I was like, yes, this is exactly what parents need, because also, it's just really hard to leave your house.
Yeah.
Regardless of what your mental health is doing. You suddenly have a baby that you have to get ready for them to go. Are they fed? Are they changed? Are they warm enough? Do you have enough diapers packed? Do you have enough wipes? Do you have formula or like anything that you need for nursing? And inevitably you try to leave and your baby has a blowout and you have to change them again. Like it's just hard to leave.
Yeah.
Add in like winter right now, it makes it so much harder to get anywhere, especially like you think the last 2 days here
It's so cold,
and Waterloo was so cold. So the good thing is now we're seeing all these virtual groups, and there's people who need that. They need that virtual connection piece, because like everybody was lonely, especially parents who literally were just stuck with babies to talk to for so long. So having those little bits of communication with other adults is just so great.
And the validation of knowing that everyone's there because they need support, like in a support group, like you're sharing your challenges, you're sharing your joys, you're sharing all of that, and in that there can be a lot of validation and feeling less alone in how you've been feeling with parenting. We do a lot of comparison, I think, now with social media, with celebrities. Like, we do a lot of this comparison that they must be like having a great connection with their child because of this picture that they posted, or you know, they're, you know, super mom because they're able to do all of these things outside of the home along with their baby. And we've talked about it in previous episodes before, how like social media is a snippet of time. It's curated, it's like edited for all of this. It's not always our reality. And on the other hand, speaking about community support, there are a lot of people now on social media that are being quite real about their experiences, which again, then we look at these, you know, influencers or pages, whatever you want to call it, on social media and be like, okay, yes, that's what I was feeling at that time. So there's like, you know, pros and cons to social media. But for those who maybe are having a really difficult time right now in motherhood and are trying to, you know, create their village, what are some supports or some ideas that you offer to those new moms?
I was reading an article not too long ago, I forget where it was, about how the idea of the village has kind of shifted. People think about, oh, it's like your mom and your aunties and, you know, those are all the people who need to be part of your village, where in reality, that's not the village I think people are looking for anymore. It's really trying to find the village of like-minded people, because it can be hard to want the support of that aunt or that mother-in-law who are really opinionated and maybe aren't up to date with how we handle babies now nowadays. So it's I think the way to look at your postpartum is to sort of see where all those circles of support can be. Kestrel Gates talks about the circles of support as like you have your inner circle, your middle circle, and like an outer circle. And that inner circle is really those people who you will let into that like inner sanctum of getting to see you at your worst. So it could be your partner, maybe you do have a good relationship with your mom or your best friend. It could also be a doula in that space where you're going to let them really do that hands-on support, where they're going to be with you through it all. Maybe they're the person who stays there and holds your baby while you sleep and brings you baby whenever they need to be fed and comes and takes your baby away, just so you can get like a solid, break of sleep once per 24-hour cycle. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you have that kind of middle circle where maybe that really opinionated aunt is located, but you know that she would be more than willing to drop off food or to pick up your groceries or to just come over and have a quick visit, but isn't going to stay long. So they're not people who are necessarily going to see you at your worst, but they're still going to be there to support you. And then that outer circle is looking for like, maybe it's a mom group, maybe it's a virtual perinatal peer support group, maybe it's going to the early on. What are the other things that can be supportive of you? I mean, your therapist can kind of sit anywhere in there as well. But just like looking at those 3 different levels and actually writing down names of people or the programs or the resources and finding them. I mean, if you look up any doula locally, most of them have resource pages of people who they're really connected with. So if you really vibe with your doula, talk to them about it. It's like, I really would love to do more. I just need to be around other adults. Where can I take a baby and feel safe? Or where can I take my baby that's free? And it's always just like, just go to an early on, even with your 4-week-old baby. Yeah. Because there's going to be other moms there who will talk to you. There's workers there who will talk to you. And the worker is more than happy to be like, oh, look at, you could like do some tummy time. And we have this great like black and white book your baby can look at. And then you can like have an arm break. Or maybe if you're comfortable, I'll hold your baby so that like you can finish your coffee with while you're talking to this mom you just met. Or just sitting at the library. It's never too early to start reading to your baby. It's free. Oftentimes there's other people around. I find librarians really just like to talk. So that's also a great place as well to go, just for like that human connection. But like, it's not really a huge commitment. If you show up and it's too much and you leave, you've not really spent anything.
Right.
I mean,
you got a nice walk out of it.
You got a nice walk. You got out of the house. Yeah. All of those things can be great.
Yeah, I love the circle of support because it's so great to kind of see it that way. Like, these people are, like, in the middle circle are the ones that I feel I can be vulnerable and know that they're still going to be there without judgment and just be there to support me. As the circles expand to those outer circles, it's also about different kinds of support with that aunt that comes. They're giving you that support in providing food, being able to sit with you, having adult conversations. But it may not necessarily be somebody that you can be fully vulnerable with, but you're still getting support. And so I really love like the idea of that circle.
That kind of middle circle with the aunt, or just talking to people who have offered to support you, being like, oh, let me know when you've had your baby and I'll drop off a meal, or I would love to like bring you coffee and your groceries, or pick up some groceries for you. Hold them to it. Write their names down and find a way to let them know like when they can support you, because that's just how you maintain the village. Kind of is a reciprocal thing. It's like, if somebody offers, you don't need to say, but like saying yes is how you get them to come back. Maybe when you're in a darker space, or when you actually really need support.
I love that you don't need to say yes, but also pause and think about how do you want to respond and what's coming up there, because I can see myself being like, no, it's okay, I got it, because I don't want to inconvenience another person, or I don't want them to know that I'm maybe struggling a little bit more, right? And so being able to pause in those moments to be like, okay, is mom guilt showing up here? Am I feeling this pressure of should? Again, like I should be able to get my own groceries, like just pause and accept the support, which sometimes it sounds easy, but for some people it can be quite difficult to accept that level of support. And so, yeah, being able to talk with your partner, being able to maybe make a list and be like, you know what, if you're coming to visit me anyway, I am running out of this, this, and this, if you don't mind grabbing that for me. And just being open with the kind of support that you are needing. Because we could all use that support regardless of if we, just had a child or not, but definitely more so when you're a brand new mom.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely, it's hard to say yes. Yeah. And I don't know where this idea of being so self-reliant came from. It's just like, why, if somebody's offering you support, chances are like they're doing that genuinely, and it's not going to hurt or harm anybody to say, you know what, we're having a really rough day today. Remember how you said that you'd be happy to pick up our groceries? Well, I can't get out of the house because we're going through, I don't know, teething, or we had a really rough night and I just don't think I can get out to get my groceries. Are you free today to go get those? Like, life happens.
Yeah. I really like the Barbie monologue where they talk about women.
I think with parenthood, with that Barbie quote, which is just so good, is just like this, you have to be so good at everything, but without anybody supporting you. Like, there's this weird societal expectation that you're going to be able to be everything for your kid without any help, which doesn't make any sense because it's too hard.
Yeah.
It feels so impossible to be everything that society is expecting. Like, you're only supposed to breastfeed. You're supposed to like be some weird combination of like a Stepford wife and Julie Andrews. Like, it's really impossible. Like, how are you supposed to be everything? Be able to deal with like all the complexities of yourself becoming a mom, going through that transformation with no support? It just doesn't make any sense. When you're like, even just going through puberty, your parents are there, they're walking alongside you through it and being like, your emotions are like really big and really tough right now. And like, people talk about it, but then they don't talk about how you're a person, you have a baby, and then all of a sudden you're this new entity that needs to be able to have it all together without anybody walking alongside you, holding your hand to make that transition.
The Barbie monologue, like the part about motherhood, is you're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kid all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also be looking out for other people. And I think you're supposed to love being a mom on its own is so hard because motherhood is difficult. I love being a mom. I don't love all parts of it.
It's like, I love my kids. I don't always like them.
Exactly.
And and people don't talk about how that's okay to feel. It's like, you can love people unconditionally, but also have moments where you're just like, I don't like you right now because you're being a little brat. Or especially once your kid grows up and starts developing an attitude, because what kid doesn't, try to make their own way in the world? And that's supposed to be okay. But like, the way you react to it, you have to be like all, unicorn and rainbows about it, when reality is just like, if an adult grown person screams in your face, you will scream back. But we don't have that same expectation of like a kid giving you attitude or screaming in your face. You're not supposed to scream back. You're supposed to be level-headed and have it all together. When in reality, like, half the time in your head, you're thinking like, I just really don't like you right now in this moment.
And it's hard too, because that's where all of the pressure comes from, right? Like, even speaking about needing to love every part of motherhood, pregnancy is a huge one.
I hated it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind it. It was what it was. I was happy because it took us so long to have a baby. So I think I had a different view of my pregnancy. I liked a lot of parts of it. But there's, again, not everyone is going to have the best pregnancy, and you don't have to love it to still want it, if that makes sense, right?
You don't have to love every minute of pregnancy, of parenthood, because it's hard. Like, who loves being sleep deprived? I don't think anybody in the world loves to be sleep deprived. Or to be needed 24/7. Like, there's moments where you just want to take care of yourself. You want that time for yourself. And I think there needs to be a shift, or more of a shift towards that being an okay option for being a parent. Is like, I shouldn't have to feel guilty because I needed to go go out with some friends for supper and I'm missing bedtime. I shouldn't have to feel guilty about that.
Yeah.
That's just me being a person.
And that's also you being able to also prioritize yourself, which in turn is going to help you show up as a mother in a different way. And it's also going to help model to your kids that it's okay for them to have their own lives. Like, it's so important. I just did like a mini episode on spending time alone. I love spending time alone. It's hard, but I've definitely prioritized it in my family to be like, mommy needs, like, I'm going upstairs to read my book, and my kiddos will come and they'll be like, hey, mommy, do you just need time alone? And I'm like, yep. They're like, okay. And they close the door and they leave, and they know that I'm still there. I love them. I'm not mad at them. I just need a little bit of me time. Or like going to the movies by myself. Like, those are things that help me, because when I'm constantly, I have 3 boys in my house, including my husband, but I have 3 boys at home and they're all needing me all the time. And it becomes overwhelming where I just need a little bit of time by myself where someone isn't grabbing me. And then I'm able to come back. And when I'm able to come back, I'm maybe a little bit more patient with them. My emotions have regulated from having that time alone. So I'm able to tend to them in a way that maybe I feel a little bit better about than never having that time alone, because of, I don't want to be, this terrible mom who never wants to spend time with their kids. But you need that, because then if not, you're going to become more irritable, you're going to become more frustrated, and you're going to end up behaving in a way that then maybe you're not going to feel good about afterwards. So yeah, it's hard.
And I see this in the support group that I co-facilitate, is moms who are just desperate to get back to work.
Yeah.
And
that's okay.
Them dealing with the guilt of that is just like, it should be okay for you to want to hold on to that piece of you.
Yeah.
You loved your career before you had a baby. You're still the same person. Like, the one thing I hate most is people coming to support groups and being like, I'm like no longer my old self, and like I need to figure out who I am. And I'm always just like, you are who you are at your core.
Yeah.
That is still like, your values are still the same. Your likes and dislikes are still the same. Have you changed because you're a parent? Yes. But like, you're still, if you want to go back to work, go back to work. Some people just want it because they need that mental stimulation that comes from working, or the like ability to have adult conversations and be around people who are of similar ages. Like, you don't need to feel guilty just because you enjoy your job.
Yeah.
Go do your job. If you can manage all of the different pieces to allow you to go work, go work.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some suggestions that you have for, I mean, I guess we've already shared some for women who are in postpartum, but what about for maybe some of our listeners who have a loved one or a family member, a friend, their neighbor who just had a child? What are some, pieces of advice or suggestions that we can give to those folks who are the ones that are supporting somebody who has just had a child?
Yeah, this is a great question, because I feel like a lot of people are just, they don't know. And I think the simplest thing is just to talk to them, because they might already have ideas of how you can support. If you're a partner, it's just having an honest conversation. I mean, probably like prenatally, about like, what are both of your expectations of like what is going to happen around the house, care of like who is going to do what. Is like, are you still expecting the same sort of division of labor? Are you like, what is the expectations? Because I think so often that conversation doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then relationships struggle in postpartum because of the difference of expectations. So having that conversation, I think, is really important.
And not only with your partner, but also with other important people in your life, right? Like,
yeah, like that inner circle
yes,
is really like, if you're close to your mom or you feel like your mom's gonna want to be involved, have a conversation of like what your actual expectations are. If you are going to become a grandparent in this person's life, I think it can also be on you to look up what are the new sleep protocols for babies. Look up what are car seats like. What are kind of like the parenting methods. I don't know what the better word for that is.
yeah, but everything's changed. You're right,
Things have changed, and also acknowledging for yourself as a grandparent that things have changed. That doesn't mean how you raised your kid was wrong. There's been research and science and years in between where things have just evolved, and embrace how beautiful that is, of how we know new things of how to take care of babies. We know new information about how to keep babies alive that we maybe didn't have 20, 30 years ago. I mean, things shifted in between my two kids, and they're just 2 years apart. There was some change of like recommendations. So embrace how amazing the change is. The way you raised your kid wasn't wrong. You raised your kid with the tools and the recommendations you had of that time. And just spending some time learning what's new. What is new, because that's just going to make your daughter, your daughter-in-law, however you're related into that family, feel more confident having you there in that inner circle if they feel like you're on the same page.
Yeah. I think that's also a respect of boundaries. Right? I think a lot of comments that I've heard is when a child is being put in the care of a grandmother, the response back is, don't worry about it. I raised however many kids. And it's not like we know you raised kids. You might be married to one of their kids or be one of their kids, but it's also like this is their first experience of being able to parent their own child, and they're going to want to do it maybe slightly differently than you have. And so being respectful of that boundary as a grandparent, and there is so much joy and excitement around becoming a grandparent, but I think, it's that respect and boundaries. It's that communication beforehand of what you think may be coming, right? Like having realistic expectations of like household responsibilities. How long is your partner going to be off of work? What kind of supports are you going to have in place for when your partner does return to work? What are some things that you are maybe needing to communicate with other people in your life? Like I was the first, I mentioned this in one of a previous podcasts, but I was the first one of our friend group to have a child, and everyone just kind of disappeared afterwards. And they may not have known kind of what to do. Like, oh, Yvonne has a kid, we're going to give her space, but being able to communicate what it is that you're wanting beforehand. Like, yes, I'm having a child and this is going to change, but I still want to hear from you. I might not be as involved in what's going on in your lives, but I still want to be kept in the loop. Or
I still would love to be invited to coffee, even if I might have to turn it down more often than not.
Exactly.
But like, it's still that feeling like you're still needed or wanted.
Included and wanted. Yeah. And I think also, in speaking of boundaries, is also being mindful of the advice that you're giving. I think there's so much advice out there, and it's most of the time unsolicited advice that you didn't ask for. So be mindful of what that person's capacity is, and ask, right? Like, what can I help you with? What are some things that you need support with? I have, like you mentioned, I'm going to the grocery store. I'm happy to pick up whatever it is that you're wanting. I'll grab dinner, and just asking for what that person may need for support.
I think there's also like learning about perinatal mental health. Like, what does it look like? There's so many resources online, and I'm sure we can include some in the show notes of just like what to look for, and being willing to ask that question of like, how are you doing to the new parent? So oftentimes it feels like as a new parent, you're not the priority, right? It's everybody wants to come see the baby. They want to like help you with the baby. And it's just like, mother your baby. If you're a parent, like, like they don't need you to do all the different things for taking care of their baby. Like, I know for me, it was like, I just wanted to hold my baby. Do I want you to hold the baby? Sure. But like, wouldn't it have been so great to be mothered? You know, like we're still needing that kind of care and support. And I think that's like another great way to go into it, is just like, how can you help the new parent get through it? And like, is it helping them with their basic needs? Is it asking them, how are you doing? Or it's like, you seemed really sad for a really long time now. Like, how are you feeling about that? Is it affecting how you go day to day? Do you maybe think that you should talk to somebody at this point, like, and coming with some resources for them? And like, they don't have to follow through on any of it, but that's like just a really easy care that you can show, of just like, hey, I've been watching and I've noticed that like you're just depressed and it's not getting any better. So here are some resources that I found, and like, take them or leave them, but like, at least you've done that legwork of trying to find somebody. Because I like, when you're in the thick of it, it's so hard to like find the way out. And like, having somebody just be like, I care about you. This is what I'm seeing. Yeah. I see you. Here are some resources for you to just take a look at. And if they resonate, great. If not, fine. But to know that other people are looking out for you, and it's not just all on you to take care of yourself and take care of your baby, is so helpful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We'll definitely add in the show notes your support group. Where can we find you on Instagram if we're wanting to take a peek at some of your resources?
Yeah, so I kind of giggled earlier when you said I was like a postpartum best friend. My Instagram is postpartum sidekick. Sort of feeling like that, like you're the heroes of your own story. I'm the person alongside you to help you with that. So postpartum sidekick, postpartumsidekick.ca. I co-facilitate a peer support group, a perinatal peer support group through Perinatal Wellbeing Ontario, along with Annika Vandenberg. It's a virtual every other week evening support group. That's been going for almost 2 years now. And then also on Fridays, locally at Encompass Health and Wellness, I run Nurture and Thrive Parent Circle. So it's an opportunity to get connected better with your community, as we have community practitioners coming in to talk about things from like optimizing your baby's development, infant feeding support, the transition into motherhood. The one I'm kind of looking forward to is we're going to have a conversation about like postpartum and intimacy.
That's a good one.
Yeah, just being really willing to talk about all the like maybe more taboo topics is like kind of my favorite thing. But then it's always followed up with like just an opportunity for connection with other parents, of just having a loosely facilitated peer support group, mostly just an opportunity to just talk about how you're feeling and what you're going through. Because I find with peer support, especially, why I love it so much is that like being able to speak our truth can be so transformative. To be able to say like, I'm having a really rough time. I'm like really struggling with this sleep regression, or like I'm really just agitated with my partner right now, and having other people in the room that will say, yeah, I totally went through that, or yeah, that's what we're going through right now. That connection piece can just be so welcome when you're going through the thick of it. So those are
that validation.
It's that you're not alone going through it, because other people are also experiencing it too.
And that's so healing to be part of that group. We've talked so many times throughout many of our podcasts episodes about community, and just really that's something that we as humans thrive on. So thank you so much for sharing all of those supports. We will add those to the show notes. And thank you so much for being here. This was so fun.
My pleasure. It was fun.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Make sure to follow Lisette and also us at Outside the Therapy Room Pod on Instagram. And we will see you next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.